Well, so there's a question from Paul Cannell from Queensland, Australia, on the live stream. And he asks this. He said, "You often speak of accomplished people. How does that apply in the case of a farmer, a poet, a prostitute, or a shopkeeper?" It's an interesting question. A farmer, I would say, is accomplished if he knows how to raise a crop. Seems obvious. Someone who knows how to raise a crop and has done so successfully, survived, fed himself and his family and all of that, is what I call an accomplished person. Because then if that person comes here to be in this circle, they're not asking me, how do I get by in life? They're saying, I know how to get by in life. What about this other realm, Robert? You see, and then I can deal with that kind of question. So that's the farmer. The poet, obviously, if you can write some poetry that's worth reading, you are an accomplished poet. It seems simple. The prostitute, a bit more difficult because I don't want to get political. And there's so much politics now involved in that occupation, and there needs to be. We have to make a more thorough examination of how that arises. I think probably some of it is okay, and a lot of it probably is not okay at all. But I'm going to leave that out. Prostitute, for me, would be accomplished if I hire her and feel satisfied. Okay, and the shopkeeper, someone who knows how to order the right amount of goods that the customers want, create a nice ambience in the shop, and the customers leave feeling that they got their money's worth, and therefore the shop thrives, and the shopkeeper is accomplished and doesn't need to come to me for advice on how to do it, but more might want to hear about this love I feel that's impersonal. I have a personal love. You've met her and it's wonderful, but there's also a love that has nothing to do, well, it has something to do with that, but it's not connected to that really. It's a love for donkeys. It's a love for tulips. There's a love that I'm so glad these things are here. And when I see them, I feel happy. I feel joyous. Kirsten and I were talking on the break, and what she said is, it's more satisfying to love than it is to be loved. And I really agree with that. Being loved is nice. There's a secure feeling in it, and you feel supported and cared for. And that was very important to me this year. I was flat on my back and couldn't do anything, couldn't meet anyone's needs. And fortunately, I have a dear friend in my life who would meet my needs, fed me even with a spoon, you know. So that's being loved. It's very nice to have that. We won't always. And but when you love, it's not the same at all. Your heart expands, and it takes in everything, and it's nourished by everything. And I think that's what Kirsten was saying. It feels wonderful to love. It's the wish-fulfilling gem, when you really want others to be happy, to attain the things that they need, to relax, and to be joyous. You wish that even for someone you don't like. I wish it for Donald Trump. I really do. May all beings be happy. This is what the Buddha said. And that's pretty good advice. Okay, so that's that. I think you had a question, Amy?
Out there in the world, there are all kinds of people with all kinds of attitudes. And in particular, I was speaking of certain situation where you come into close contact with people that might not give you the best reception or energy that you would like. And when you know you're a good person and a well-meaning person and that you have not done anything wrong to that person, and they give you bad energy, particularly say some nasty things to you, with a seemingly unprovoked action of myself, I find I've gotten better at not caring as much, but I do still feel affected by nasty people. And unfortunately, I do have to come into contact with some of them, much more than I would like to, just doing some of the activities that I love to do.
And so the question is?
How the hell do I just ignore them a little better and just keep living my happy, joyous life, which I truly feel I have and I'm grateful for. But I feel that when I come into contact with certain people, certain energies, and specifically words or just looks, I still do feel affected. My question is how to better be less permeable and stronger and more comfortable to just not give a fuck.
Well, that's a good question. To begin with, it's hard not to be reactive because I was discussing psychobiology yesterday. To survive on the African steppes, which is where our genome began its development, you were part of a small band, a tribe, but not a big tribe, a small tribe. There may have been 5 or 12 or 20 people in that group. And you were dependent on those others for defense against foes and animals and all of this. And so to be thrown out of the tribe would be a disaster, a personal disaster. And therefore, we're all highly programmed to want the approval of others and to be accepted into the tribe, whatever constitutes the tribe. There's no getting around that. So those feelings are going to arise. The feeling of wanting to be approved of and not spoken badly to is very natural. It can't be uprooted. The way that I have learned to deal with this is I've come to understand that everyone is doing the best that he or she can do. No one would really choose to be ugly if they could be beautiful, but they can't at this moment. Maybe later they will. And so this is more a question of understanding. And maybe out of that understanding will come some forgiveness to the extent that you can forgive that person, not by saying to the person, I forgive you. I just mean by letting it go in your heart. It will become less compelling. So I would say, try to understand that we're all doing the best we can. There was a Who, you know the band The Who?
Yes.
Yeah, they had a really good song on this topic from back in the 70s. No one knows what it's like to be the bad man, to be the sad man behind blue eyes. Remember this? That's how to look at it. No one really wants that role of being nasty. They just can't help it. That's their defense against whatever they had to defend against. Yes? Yeah. I hope that helps. Yes?
Yeah.
Okay. If you're watching this on YouTube, I would just like to give a shout out to Ricardo Madrasso, the cameraman, and to Pat Baum, the sound woman. These two are going to make a fantastic movie of all this, and I'll really be happy to have it out there. I really will. You should include my thanks in the movie.
I will.
Okay, that piece has to be in there.
I will.
Okay.
As you've become awake, it's been some time, and since everything's in motion and it's always fluid and there's nothing, it's all transient or moving. So how have you seen your transients from the beginning of your stages of awakening to where you're at now? Do you see what's different for you? Is it the same, or is it expanded, or do you any different clarity? I mean, any?
Yeah, I'm going to go back to the free fall metaphor, falling out of the airplane. At first, it's quite a shock. I think it's gotten a lot easier to have nothing to believe in at all, except what's here in this moment. There's nothing that I keep. Like I said before, that loving feels much more spacious than being loved, although they're both good. But what if tomorrow I feel the need to be loved and loving won't fix it? Well, then I have to deal with that. So I can't remind myself, wait a minute, Robert, you said loving was much better, so just go there. No, it doesn't work that way. See, we feel what we feel. This is really important to understand. And I think that can get lost when someone like me speaks in these, very spacious terms. But I've got the same problems that everyone else does. My mind is a boiling kettle, and who knows what might come to the surface. I have no idea. And it might be shocking, it might be painful, it might be frightening. It might be this loneliness that Kara and I were talking about earlier. And all I know to do is walk on. That's impermanence. Just allow whatever arises, try to the best of your ability not to defend against it, just see it and let it go. That's what impermanence is. This is a flow. You don't have to get stuck with one thing or another. And to the extent that we understand that, it becomes easier. But I don't think anyone ever solves life. Life is a lot more challenging than the intellect has the ability to solve that equation. It's more like improvisation, and you just deal with what's on the plate in the moment. As Walter Chappell said to me once, Robert, he said, you have to chew your life up one bite at a time, and sometimes you barely have enough saliva to get it down. And that is one of the best things anyone ever told me, ever. That really gave me the idea. It's a visual image anyway. See, it's very hard sometimes. Your beloved dog, you have to put the dog down. I had this experience. So I take the dog for a last run in the back of my pickup so that she can bark at all her old enemigos. And she had a great time with that. And then we got back and the vet came over to give her the lethal stuff. And boy, that was hard to swallow. Had barely enough saliva to get it down. In fact, I helped it with a couple of shots of rum before she got the injection. Now that's what I'm talking about. You can't erase that. You have to go through it. You have to go through it, all of it. Even if it feels terrible, even if it feels like it will kill you, you still have to do it. What's the alternative? Escapism is the alternative. And I'm not willing to be an escapist. I don't want to waste my life that way. It's not worth it. You'll always be running. And I'm in the condition where I don't have to run from anything. I think it was you, Mikhail, who mentioned, no, Marcus, I think it was you, mentioned that the Buddha, Mara came up, and that was you, yes? Yeah. And all these temptations. Exactly. See, that's what this conversation is about. That's what he was talking about. That you'll be challenged by fears and desires that could take you off your space. But you don't really want to be taken off your space because your space is your life. So whatever those fears and desires are, you just look at them. That's what the Buddha did. He just sat there. And when Mara, the evil one, sent visions, frightening visions, just sits there. See, it's not easy. It's not like, oh, well, it's a nice afternoon and I ordered a pizza and everything. No, that's not what was going on. See, this is a tremendous struggle at times for all of us. It is for me. I'm not trying to claim to, when I say I'm awake and know it, I'm not claiming that I've got this thing knocked and it's all figured out and all I have to do now is be awake, la-di-da. It's quite the opposite, actually. The challenges that are sent become more severe, not less. When I say sent, I don't mean to imply that they're coming from some other world. What I mean is there's a lot of unconscious material that when you become more aware, you start to notice. It was heretofore unconscious, but now it isn't. It's starting to bubble up. And some of those things are really difficult, really difficult. And it requires an intention to be awake. If you want to be awake, you have to intend that. And you can't decide to intend it. You have to find a place in you that dearly wants to be awake, more than it wants to be frightened, more than it wants to be gratified, more than it wants to attain its desires or overcome its fears. All of that's human stuff. It's great, if you have a yen to have sex with someone, okay, you don't have to overcome that in my calculation. Not at all. You can participate in that, but don't let it knock you off your spot. There's a way to be involved in getting what we think we desire and still stay on your spot. And there's a way to feel your fears and not have to go running to Francis Lucille for succor. You can sit there with it, and it takes an intention. I understand that. But I'm sure you have that intention, Kara. Otherwise, we wouldn't have had the conversations that we've had. You would be hiding that, and you aren't. So that, to me, implies, or evinces is a nice word, an intention to be able to sit with that without Francis. Because otherwise, that's how you become involved in a cult. You need that help. The problem with that kind of help is that it's also hypnotic. The hypnotism of a man like Lucille can't be separated from the good stuff. It's all mixed together. And what I'm trying to say about myself is I'm not hypnotic. I know what hypnotism is. I've practiced it in my work, and I'm an anti-hypnotist. If anyone starts to become hypnotized, I'll find a way to upset that apple cart real quick. That's when I knew that about myself, that's when I felt free to carry on this way, because that was a tremendous fear of mine, that I would end up with followers. And I don't want to be followed. I want people to hear what I have to say and then go off and live their lives and be free. Doesn't mean you can't come back next year. That's not what I'm saying. But I don't want anyone to make Robert the source of great comfort or something. The source of great comfort is inside, to be a light to oneself. Okay. Anything further?
I would like to talk about being adult and adulthood. It's something that we've discussed in our Facebook groups. And I think I remember you saying that being adult is a prerequisite to becoming awake. So I would like to hear again what you have to say about the psychological state of being adult.
Okay. What does it mean to be an adult is a good question. What does it really mean to be an adult? It means, in my view, to see the world realistically. Because when you're an adult, it means that you can handle your own life. You may require help at times, but basically an adult is someone who sees her situation or his situation realistically. Part of being adult is knowing that you're going to die. And so I don't consider the people who imagine that they have an afterlife and they're sure of it, I don't consider those people are fully adult. I think they're in denial. And so already attaining true adulthood is a tremendous achievement. It's a big milestone. And maybe there's really not much difference between what I'm calling awake and being an adult. Maybe they're the same thing. Or if they're not quite the same thing, maybe at one extreme of adulthood, it just overlaps entirely with being awake, and there's no way to really distinguish any transition from full adulthood to being awake. I don't know. But it's not easy to be an adult. There's something in all of us that wants mommy. I mean, after all, we all do. My mom died this year, and I didn't need her help anymore. But yesterday, I sat there thinking about how much I had enjoyed the day, and I had a copy of the Depending on No thing on the table beside me, and I looked at it, and I thought, I wish she could have read this book. I wish she could have seen a live stream of this conference. She would have loved this so much, you know? So we have that need. But fortunately, I can see that need as an adult, and I understand that's life. And so I'm not crippled by it, and I'm not yearning for that. I'm not yearning for what I cannot have. That's the adult position. And the adult position, I want to say to you, Marcus, is ambivalent. Ambivalent. How do you say ambivalent in Alemán?
Ambivalent.
Oh. I've got my first word in German. Jawohl, also, I get that one. Ambivalente. Ambivalente, yeah. So ambivalence. Maybe this. No, maybe this. I'm not really sure. It could be this way, or maybe it's that way. I can't really conclude. I can't really come to any conclusions. I'm not sure. This is a beautiful space if one can stand it. It's a beautiful space to be ambivalent. Just don't know. And I'm not going to jump to conclusions. Maybe there's a life after death. It could be. But I'm sure not going to bet on it. That would be to conclude on improper evidence. But on the other hand, I'm ambivalent. I'm not going to say I'm sure there isn't and ridicule everyone who has that desire, because perhaps there is. There may be something in what I call, Robert, that is a continuation of what happened before that particular egg was fertilized. Maybe it's encoded in the DNA. For all I know, it might be. In fact, there's a bit of evidence for that. And so I wouldn't rule it out. There may be reincarnation in that sense. But I'm skeptical that I was some kind of potentate or great king or the Buddha in my past life, which is when the reincarnation people talk about it, you notice they've always been some Maharaja or queen or something, and they never, you know. So that's what I mean by an adult. Someone who can survive without knowing the answers to all the questions and knows how to carry on, even in the face of resistance or difficulty, then you're an adult. Someone you love dies. Wow, it hurts, it's a real loss, but you don't come apart. You're an adult. You say, this is part of it. It's okay to break down and weep, and that's not what I mean by you don't come apart. But there's a basic structure there that's an adult structure that's going to survive that, because it's actually a normal fact of life. It's not that this happens to me and everyone else gets off scot-free. This is the conditions that we're living under, that one moment someone is here and the next moment they aren't. Today is both my kid sister's birthday, and also this is the first anniversary of the death of a very dear friend of mine, Agustin Romero Torres, who died on this date 1 year ago. We were really good friends. I went to see him, and he was already, I think, in the other world. I don't think he really saw me. I put my hand on him and told him I loved him, and he didn't seem to respond. So I went out into the street to cry, and I really cried. And about 20 minutes later, someone came out and told me, Augustine just passed away. He was waiting for you to come. And I didn't believe that. I still don't, but it was a great story. So my sister's birthday and my friend's death day, both on the same day, that's life. That's really life. And so the question that you're asking, are you able to be in a world like that and not try to escape from it? Not try to pretend that there's some exit from this situation, because there isn't. And not only that, but you younger ones may not entirely grasp this yet. I know I didn't, but it's pretty brief. It's pretty quick, quicker than you might imagine. The Buddha spoke to that too. He said, like a candle burning down, like dew on the grass in the morning sun. 1 minute it's there, and then, whoops. So if you have vigor, mental or physical or both, use it to the best of your ability. That's really my advice. Make the most of it. Enjoy life, dance, love, sing, and all of that to the best of your ability. It's my advice. I did that, and I'm so glad I did. I can sit here now, maybe will never really dance again. I think I will, but if that doesn't come back, that's okay. I danced. Yes. Haven't heard from you, Maggie. Do you have anything you'd like to say?
I have things swirling around, but nothing comes clear enough.
Okay.
You know.
You're here for a few days, though, right?
Yes, exactly. That's
So,
why I'm letting it
anytime then.
percolate.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, I'm not.
I pretty much heard from everyone else and just checking.
We were talking about adulthood today, right now, and I wonder, when you look to our society, in particular to the Western society, I have the feeling of some lack of institution
institutions that provide a kind of jump into adulthood. Because what I learned from reading and also from living in some tribes, that there is a kind of institution that you put on a young boy or an old boy and an old girl, and they have to do some quest. They have to go through something, have to walk into this desert or to the jungle, take a drink of strong psychedelic, and to experience something which you cannot teach by culture, which cannot pass on by reading or talking or even by just observing the society. So, do you think that, like, I consider myself young, but I wonder if you see a possibility in this society to set up this kind of initiation to adulthood again, and would you say something about this, particularly taking psychedelics? Because I know that you did, and I know that I did, and many friends of mine did, and this kind of thing really helped. And I was told by a good friend Julio that he is learning and having a positive impact on the experience I had on psychedelics. So it could be passed on. Nobody, it's not so that everybody has to take it. So I'm wondering, have you any thoughts or opinions about society, institutions, and initial experiences for becoming an adult?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's an interesting question, because the cultures before industrialized culture usually had a coming of age method and subjected their children to it. It often involved a vision quest or trying to overcome some kind of suffering. Like a child might be put out with any food and without any food and water, and 48 hours later they would come back, and by that time probably that child had had many visions and fears and all of this. So to the extent that one has not received that in adolescence, maybe we need to recreate it later in life. Maybe that's what you're referring to? Mm-hmm. So psychedelic drugs, you know, I was a child of the 60s, so it was pretty routine to just drop acid and everything. I did it 4 times. I had 4 bad trips, so I never wanted to do that again. But I later discovered smoking DMT, and I really loved that. But that was so powerful that I learned to do it not as a toy or a game, but to take it very seriously and kind of prepare to have those visions. And I think that was helpful. Then in New Mexico, when I first got there, peyote was legal. So it was all around. I pretty much ate some every morning for about a year and was kind of psychedelicized lightly all that time. And I think that was helpful. And then, of course, I've eaten a lot of mushrooms. There is a place, San Jose del Pacifico, it's called. It's high in the mountains south of Oaxaca. And that's where the best mushrooms on this planet grow. And Catania and I went up there for a week. We rented a little hut and walked up into the mountains, got some mushrooms from the locals, and went down in the hut. It was cold there. It was the cloud forest. They had a fire going all the time, and ate a bunch of mushrooms. And I had some amazing visionary experiences. This is like 10 years ago, very beautiful. And then my last psychedelic experiences were about 5-6 years ago with a substance called Salvia divinorum, which is the most powerful experience that I've ever had on any kind of drugs. And I only recommend it if you think you can be profoundly jarred and still be okay. That's a very, very deep thing. So Robert Hall, my friend I've mentioned, he came over one day. We were just talking, and I told him about this experience I'd had with Salvia divinorum, and he wanted to try it. And I warned him. I said, "This is really difficult, man. If you only do this if you really want to get exploded out of your body-mind and go elsewhere. You won't be there." And he said, okay, he wanted to try it. And it only lasts, I should explain here, only for about 3 or 5 minutes, something like that. You smoke this stuff, and you try to smoke as much as you can, and within a few seconds, you're out. You need someone tending you and take the pipe out of your mouth. That's how quick it comes on. And so I instructed him. I said, I'm going to light this. Just suck as much of it up as you can, because you're not going to get a second puff. It'll just be this one hit. Okay, so Robert was an old pot smoker, and so he knew how to take a hit. And he did. He lay down there on the floor, and Catania and I watched him writhing around like this on the floor for about 3 or 4 minutes. And then he gets up and he looks at me and he says, "I'm really glad I have my practice." That's the kind of thing you can't share while the cat's alive, but now that he's gone, every story he's ever told me is fair game.